as I was told, the story goes that Earl and someone named Uncle something or other, I'm not sure who it was, but it would have been on Butch Miller and Megan Davis's property, because there used to be a road that went from where Earl lives on East Sandy Ridge that went up over the mountain and would bring you out on Megan and Butch's driveway right across from Springer's store. But anyway, they got this bright idea that they were going to lasso a deer. So they crawled out onto a limb from a white oak tree that hung out over the field. And they sat there quietly, and they finally got a doe to walk right underneath them. And they held the lasso down, and they finally, wiggled it down around her neck. And when they cinched it tight, she took off running and drug them both out of the tree. And they both hit the ground and had some bumps and bruises. But there was, a story to tell afterward. But I kind of wanted to ask them, if Earl was here, I would ask, how'd you get the rope back? But I don't know if they ever did. Probably for a few, weeks or so, there was probably a deer walking around with a rope around its neck. But that's the story I've got, so I'll turn it over to you two and whatever you got.
I don't have too much.
I'll give a little history on myself here. My grandparents grew up out here. They moved here, I'm going to say in the 30s. I actually asked a couple people here if they knew them. It was Charlie and Mary Root. My mother's name was Evelyn June. I had an Aunt Frances and an Uncle Bob. And I believe they attended the schools here before the rest of you did here. They had to come to the school. I don't know where else they would have went. So I have a little history back here. I used to go with my grandfather when I was small. And favorite time was coming out here in hunting season. And we would go visit all these camps. And we would start down here at Considines at the time, Irish settlement, and we'd work north. We used to go down into Miles when they had the camps down in there. We'd come out through, we'd stop at Springer's. Of course, you always had to stop at Springer's store and get gas in his old 56. I can see it today, his red and white Ford station wagon. That would be the highlight of the end of Friday after school, because we knew he'd be sitting in the driveway waiting to bring us to the mountain, and we'd be here till Sunday. So got to know some families over the years. Got to know some history a little bit about different things that were taking place out here. The one thing I will say is my grandmother was part Indian. And I don't know how old I was, but she did scare the living daylights out of me, because I watched her powwow. And I'll never forget this guy's name, Jack Heisler. I was young. He shot himself through the foot in deer season, and she powwowed on his foot. And I thought, what is this? And I'm sitting there but watching it. But she did that. She powwowed on my hand. I had warts in school, and she powwowed on that and did that. How my grandparents ever got together, that I have no clue. There's some history back then. That is, my grandfather worked for Bethlehem Steel, helped build the iron for the Golden Gate Bridge, ended up with black lung disease. My grandmother, being part Indian, but she didn't come from an Indian family that I could ever find to say that she was from this particular tribe. She actually came from the area of Pottstown. And tack hatches, I remember that name when I was young, would come up. So somehow they were affiliated. I don't know if she was adopted and moved in. But when she passed away, she still had her jet black hair with one little streak of white through it. That was it. And she looked like an Indian squaw. If you had ever seen pictures of her, it was back in the 70s, you would say that. But I used to have a lot of good times out here. We rode around. We would go to, there was like a ritual with my grandfather. He was on oxygen. He would, the old farm there, he would sit on the front porch, and I'm probably going to get in trouble for this. He would sit on the front porch when I was younger. And of course, there was no homes down on the other side. Carson Dietz was down in there across from where your driveway is. He would pull out this old 30-30 Octagon rifle. And he would sit there and he would take a deer and drop it in its spot. Clear down there. He would do that with a turkey. One time he did that with a turkey, and I thought that was just unreal, fantastic, and everything else. Till the next weekend when I come out, because I went to school and told everybody how my grandfather shot this turkey. Till I come out the next weekend and I found out that the game warden was there seeing him drinking a cup of coffee and saying, your grandson's telling everybody you're killing turkeys out of season. So after that, you learn to button your trap and do that. Used to drive his 56 Ford around out here before we even driver's license were thought around about. We'd be out here. But there is a lot of history in this out here. I did learn over the years. You've got the Mussers that had the Ponderosa, that had the Mussers potato chips, Charles Chips, everybody remembers them. You got the Sturgis that had the other half back there. They have the Sturgis pretzels, and they're still going. They split that up back there when they had the reserve, and it got sold off, and then it got developed after that. And you had a lot of people with the snowmobiles. How about when Paul Asper got into snowmobiles back in 70s? I think it was 70s when he got involved in that, and had Artie Cat. They would appear in these fields at Jones's, Springers. They were all over. I can remember when they put the pipeline through. They used my grandfather's field out there with all the equipment and everything, and put it in the field that's there. And they put this pipeline that goes through here, back through this, spent summers out. The best memory I have, they were Rices from Jersey Shore. They used to come up and they farmed these farms up here, and they would plant potatoes, and they would challenge Sugar Valley to produce more potatoes than out this way. And they would plant my farm. I think they plant Jones, they'd Springers, and a couple other ones. And I thought it was so cool to come out here in grade school and spend a weekend behind that old Farmall tractor on that potato planter with a metal seat, no springs, steel wheels, and spend days in there planting potatoes in these fields around here. Now, if I would do it, I probably couldn't walk again, but those type of things come out here and they did it. I'm trying to think, was there anything else?
Well, there's one thing when you mentioned the farming, I remember they come out here and planted sunflower seeds.
Yep.
And of course, that was supposed to be a crop because we had deer problems. And that was supposed to be a crop that we could plant and harvest it. Well, they planted it, and we had sunflower seeds all over out here, so the plants, but the deer consumed them all. They never had anything to harvest at all. It was unbelievable.
Yep. I think Penn State was the one that said about planting the sunflower. Stearns.
Yeah.
I think that was Stearns that planted them, and they were supposed to thrive. They thrived real well. The deer did too. I mean, I don't even know if they got enough to.
They didn't get anything.
They didn't get it. Yeah, I mean, they picked them. It was they ate them pretty good.
It was quite amazing. I mean, we do have a good deer population, and they showed their colors.
Yes, they did.
Well, Bill, what did your grandfather do for a living? Betty and I remember going out and visiting your grandparents. When he was here, he didn't work. So I don't know if he had the black lung, because I always remember him on the oxygen tank. And then I found out later that he had contributed black lung from the welding and everything down at Bethlehem Steel. If he was welding.
I don't think he was working at all time. My grandmother now, she worked, because I remember going with her into the old nursing home on Susquehanna Avenue up there above where the college bought. She would go in there and she would work, and he would take her to work and then pick her up, and that was part of our trip. That we knew that I knew that I was going to be stopping at Springer store for candy or ice cream or something there, going in and going back. But then
Right, you'd stop at Springer store and hope it was Nevin waiting on you as a kid, because Mabel would give you one malted milk ball for a penny, and Nevin would give you 5.
Yeah, I do remember that. Yeah.
Yes, I remember
Yep.
that. Yes.
Yeah, but that was a highlight, and like I said, they were out here in the 30s.
Did he ever do upholstery work? I thought he did upholstery work for Smith.
He didn't. Not my grandfather. I worked for Smith Furniture for years. When I was going to school and graduated, I spent some time at Smith Furniture, but he did. It might have been one of my mother's relationships. I think she was with a Stevens at one time. And I don't know if it was Ben Stevens there that finally opened up his own upholstery shop or whatever, and now the boy has it already. And I know somewhere there was a Cooper involved in it also. It's kind of tough to get the whole family, go back and get all the history, because there's pieces missing. Like when my grandfather was alive, they used to have pictures of them down here doing the Caldwell Dam with an old steam shovel. And there's this old steam shovel in the middle of that dam, digging it out and making the Caldwell Dam. And when he passed away, of course, the stuff disappeared. I don't know if it ended up in Florida with my uncle and aunt, but we didn't get it.
Do you remember the Caldwell Dam being done?
I can remember.
How deep did they dig it? Does anybody know?
Truckway. How did it get built?
Evers should, there's land in it.
Yeah.
Well, no, they didn't live there at that point in time, I don't think.
I mean, they had, like Bill said, they had a steam shovel there. I don't remember the steam shovel, but I remember the ramp out where the cottage is there now, right across the road from that. There was a ramp come up out where they hauled all the dirt out to take it down and filled in there where the breast is now.
Right, and when Billy Brock died, they bought his family for his land for watershed,
right.
yes.
Yeah,
And that was in 52.
I can remember when Bill lived there. I got a story to tell about going. I used to go to Bob Gutchall's house where
Okay, where did Bob Gutchall live?
he lived in the old farmhouse there where Carol Asper has the new house built.
Oh, okay, that was his house, all right. Okay.
And I stayed there after school and things of that nature. I would sometimes get off there and stay there from the
They
time.
didn't have children, so
No.
they took foster children in.
And I would go there and help him farm. But this one time, he had, the garage is still there. He had an old LaSalle car, and he would only drive it maybe twice a year. But one day we got in it and we drove over to Billy Brock's. And I went into Billy Brock's house, and he was a hermit per se. I don't know. The thing I can remember.
He wanted to get married, but he would go offer to buy, like he went to offer to buy my Aunt Ruth Kaler. He offered to buy her, and there were several other women that he went and asked if he could buy them for his wife.
But anyhow, this night we drove over there. It was about probably 5 o'clock in the evening, and we drove over and got out of the car, went into Bill, and he was cooking supper. And he had a kitchen stove there. And when I walked in, the first thing I saw was the kitchen stove had legs on it about that high off. And he had swept the floor, and all the sawdust and wood chips and everything was just swept in under the stove. There was a pile of dirt there underneath the stove. And he was cooking supper. and he had frying potatoes. And he didn't have a pan or anything. They had the potatoes sliced right on top of the wood stove. And he was cooking, he had a lid on it, and that's how he was cooking his. I can remember that as though it was yesterday.
Well, he didn't have much family life. His mother died before 1900, and then he lived mostly by himself, except when his father remarried twice, and the marriages didn't work out, so these women would leave him. So Billy didn't have much of a family life.
He's buried in the cemetery over here at the church.
Yes, and he's not the last burial. Everybody says that, but there were 2 Edwards single women that were buried in 54, and nobody remembers them being buried in there. Clara Fritz mentioned it in Out Caldwell Way, and that's what everybody always said, but I can't find anybody that remembers that.
The thing that happened, and I don't know when it was probably the early 50s. He died in the early 50s.
52.
50, yeah.
52.
But he went into the courthouse, or the post office one day. Apparently, he was getting some kind of a pension or Social Security or something, and he wasn't getting paid. So he went in with a gun and was going to collect his money.
Oh,
I don't know whatever happened. I never heard the total story, but that's all I knew.
I heard he used to take the wagon in with his potatoes into Lock Haven, park on the street and sell them until his wagon was empty, and then he'd drive back home. You never heard that story?
No.
That's in the Express. If you look at some of their old editions,
Yeah.
it's in there.
Now, were they Irish?
Pardon?
Were they Irish, these people that would grow the potatoes? The reason I wonder is a lot of the Irish moved here
No, they
because
were
of
from
potato
Switzerland.
famine. And I wondered if they were the ones that were planting the potatoes over here.
No, they were the Brock's were from Switzerland.
Oh,
And they came over right after the Civil War was over and moved down here.
okay.
Some of them stayed in New York where they came in through, but then a lot of them came down here. There's 2 different Brock families, but they are brothers that settled in Caldwell.
My mother said that he tried to get her to take care of him, get down and stay there, take care of him. Then I heard that he used his plate twice before he washed it. He'd use one side and flip it over to the other side.
He probably did. My dad took care of him when he was right before he died in 52. And he never took his clothes all off either, as he just put something on over top instead. So he was probably a pretty smelly person. He wasn't a very big man though.
No.
I heard that he didn't have an outhouse when he did his business. He just went out in the garden.
Oh, I would think there was probably no plumbing in the house.
No, there was not that I know of.
There's no close neighbors.
Right. But he was a character. I'll never forget my Aunt Ruth telling me the story about him wanting to buy her. He walked up to the Myers house and said, I want to buy her.
And she settled on ball.
Well, that and same way of going out the road, the Handyville way there, there used to be the Bartons out there and the Browns. We always called it the Browns Valley, but Mr. Brown them had all that ground out there. Used to hear my grandparents talk about Indian Joe and the Bartons and going out to Sinking Springs there and how they used to collect chestnuts. And
Okay, these boys their mother was a Barton.
And they would take them down to Waterville at the train station and stuff, and they would sell all that stuff. Actually, there was a gentleman stopped a few years ago and asked me if Roops were my grandparents, and I said yes, and he gave me a book that he had purchased. It's called Dr. Nina and the Black Panthers. And the Black Panther, I think is what it's called. I have a copy of it. He purchased it. That whole book is around Caldwell, Haneyville, Sinking Springs, Waterville, and names all these people. You know, Glover's mentioned in there. It's pretty neat. She ended up being a doctor in Williamsport, what the story ended up. But I don't even know if you can get them anymore or not. They were selling them in the library, but it really has a lot of history. I used to spend time, you know, and I think back, I wish I spent more time with some of these older people. Mr. Kreider out there, when it lived there behind the mountaintop and that, and he used to give us a lot of good stories, and of course Bud Kreider did too.
Well, they used to own a mountaintop.
Yeah, they owned it.
Before it was
And,
called a mountain.
yeah, and they would give us a lot of good stories. And then Mr. Saylor ended up with the mountaintop, and of course he would come around and make sure everybody was taken care of, and we'd tell you stories about different things out here too. You know, you think you're the younger you're the younger generation now, but listening to that stuff, there's a lot of history there from the people. Those older people knew and used to tell a lot out here. You know, I growing up and with it, and if Russo would have been here today, the commissioner, I could have put him on the spot, because we used to ride motorcycles out here in the 60s and 70s. We'd come out over this mountain all the time. And of course, the pipelines were one of the spots we'd hit. But our favorite spot to hit was the Caldwell Church, because we'd ride our motorcycles, we would park them there, sneak down into the Caldwell Dam when Mr. Lynn was down there, and we'd fish it. I think he used to tie flies there when the Woolrich had the other place.
To stop that, and I don't know what happened.
He would tie flies. I think every fly that he tied was checked out in the Caldwell Dam.
Well, like that, you didn't have to sneak in, it was open to fishing.
Yeah, well, we used to park up here, and then I'll tell you about a story about Mr. Fritz. We used to park up here at the church and then go down through where the power line was, and then we'd be on the back side. And then we used to see different people come in there swimming. That's all I'm going to go say any about that. But they would come in there to the dam and they would swim there on the roadside too. Mr. Fritz, I'll never forget Mr. Fritz. We were down here one day and we all come up there to the church getting on our motorcycles. He comes down around the corner and said, "What are you boys doing today?" And I think some of you will remember this when the Happy Days, the little snuff tobacco that they came out with years ago, they called it Happy Days or whatever. We all thought we were big because we were trying that. Well, he said, "Here, I'm going to see if you boys or men are men, you know." He pulled out a pouch in a baggie of his homemade chewing tobacco.
Is that Cliff?
And he gave every one of us a sample. Well, I'm going to tell you what, there was 5 of us there. We didn't make it out of the parking lot at the church, and we were back in the woods, and we were puking our guts out. I don't know how else to say. And he was laughing. Never forget him doing that. He grew his own tobacco, chewing tobacco back
Yeah,
there.
I bet that was Cliff Fritz.
Yeah, Clifford,
Alpha
yeah.
was so quiet,
Yeah, Cliff. Yeah, and he got us good that day. And there was a few of us there that had ties to this mountain that he got us on that. But we had a lot of good times out here.
I'd like to make a comment that somebody said to me earlier, and do you remember Frank Starr from school?
Frank Starr.
Frank Starr.
Yeah.
You were saying how well behaved everybody was. Now, this other person heard a different version, but I heard it from 2 people, from my Uncle Jim and Betty Shade. And John McCullough was my age, so he was probably a first grader, I'm thinking, probably. And Frank Starr lifted him up by his ears. In back of the school?
Yeah,
Yeah.
almost tore the ears off.
Yeah.
Speaking of Frank Starr,
Pardon me?
Frank and I were the same age.
Okay, well, I thought you were.
and-
How did you miss that?
I don't know that story.
Okay,
One time there was 3 of us and another guy and we tied Frank up in a tree.
no wonder he was mean.
We tied
I
him
didn't
up
know that.
and we left him there. And I don't know how long it was before he got loose, but I mean, we tied him up pretty good. That's, you know, it's saying about how good we got along together, but that's one of the times we did some pranky tricks. But
Yeah,
we actually tied him up in a tree, and I mean, it was a big hemlock tree, and we tied him up about 3 feet off the ground. And
Yeah, he died probably almost 20 years ago now.
yeah,
Because I thought, when I started genealogy, I thought, oh, I'll go talk to him. I talked to one of his relatives, but
do you remember him, where he lived?
they lived down by the end of the spillway across the road.
Yeah,
And before that, I'm trying to think what the, Wolves lived there.
mm-hmm.
There's a picture that one of the Wool girls gave me that Billy Brock's in it, and he's carrying his usual loaf of bread in the bag, and he offered to buy Wool's daughter too. He told me, so.
Yeah, that was lumbering, was a lumbering shack that Wolves built first, and then Star lived there.
Okay, I didn't even know the Wolves were there at that point.
Yeah.
My dad was still alive, and he talked about it, and so.
But one of the myths that I know about or was told about, and I know where the sites are, is Prince Farrington, you know, during Prohibition.
Yeah, I don't know much about that.
There was 2 sites. There was one down back at where our farm is, down the hollow, about 2 miles. There was a place where he had a still, and I saw it many times. I know where it is, and I don't know whether it's still existing because of the lumbering and everything. But then there's another one in where the trailer is beyond Bryan's Lane. The bend there were the cutouts on the left-hand side.
Oh,
Where you
okay.
go down in that hollow there. He had a place down there about a mile. There was a still there. That some guy was writing a book about it, and he called me, and I don't know how he got my name. Wanted to know about him. And,
Claybill was his name.
huh?
Claybill.
Yeah, yeah. And he called me and interviewed me about he wanted a little history on it, but it was apparently back in the 30s, 28, 30, 32 area.
Yeah, I usually don't mess with the subject or so. If somebody else has done it, I don't bother. I want to uncover what hasn't been discovered yet.
Carol Kaler, the late Carol Kaler, claimed that the Caldwell Church was used to store some grain. I don't think it was the church yet, but that building.
Right.
And then, because they allowed him to store the grain in that building, they got a new roof. Yeah, she told me about that.
Well, it was built as a grain storage building, and then it was converted over to. You said there was a school there.
Yes.
And I don't have no knowledge of that. Out in my truck, I've got a lot of pictures and stuff.
Clara Fritz was the one who had it in her column that's where the old school was before the church was built.
So whether was it the building, that building, or whether it was at the location before they built the.
I don't know that it really stated.
See, there's something there that could have happened. It could have been built as a grain storage area because the Swartzes, I think, are the ones that built it. I've got the history.
Well, the
But-
Fritzes bought it at auction, the church,
It
it went
was-
up for tax sale.
Yeah.
They bought it and used it as a grain storage place, so,
But
I wouldn't think
it may
the
have been
Fritz-
used
yeah.
temporarily as a school while they built this for the school.
Well, I think it was a school prior to it being turned into a church. I
Yeah.
think that was the statement. that
But it
she-
may have only been 1 year, but I had no knowledge of that until today. That it was a school. I've got a lot of old pictures, of it.
Where did the old school that was out, the Haneyville Church, it was moved out there? Remember the old green schoolhouse they put back in there, and then Browns that had
was a Brown's Repairs in there years ago, had it. But I never really asked where it was moved from to
It
there.
didn't burn down.
It burnt, but it was moved back in there then at one time. I don't, was it originally in that area and moved back?
I don't know. The only thing I know was there. It was there on this side of John.
Yeah.
But it burned.
Yeah, it burnt. But that was moved there from somewhere.
The cinnamon, oh, okay, all right, gotcha. Yeah, Loretta reminded me of a story that I told her about my grandfather, our grandfather, I should say. But actually, when my grandfather came out here, he bought the house with his uncle. They lost their, his brother, I'm sorry, yeah. Well, anyhow, they lost their father very early, so they were sent to Girard College. So they always stayed together and did lumber business and all that. I don't know, Warren, you probably remember Roy Copenhagen.
Yep.
Well, they bought the place together, and they were, how do I say this? They got away with stocking the freezer and all that kind of stuff.
There was all kinds of bears they had to get rid of.
Yeah, and this particular summer, it was 1951, I believe, if I remember the date right, or the year right. They had this cinnamon bear that bears were getting in their cornfields and eating all the corn. So my uncle, my great uncle, was a very good hunter, and that's what he loved. And he always had the game warden after him too, because the game warden happened to be, he grew up with the game warden down in Juniata County, and this game warden moved up here. So the game warden knew him. But anyhow, this particular time, they got the bear, and he even had John and Nevin Springer involved in watching the fields too, because I didn't know that until Willard told me that story. But anyhow, my uncle shot it, but my grandfather, Frank Copenhagen, had to say that he did it. And they put the bear up, and they called the game warden, and they took the bear and supposedly stuffed it and took it down to the museum in Hershey. So whether it ever got there or not, I never did find out. But they, in doing this, and my dad said, well, if they'd looked in the smokehouse, they'd have seen 3 more bears. So,
They said they had all the neighbors around with all the bears coming in, and they knocked down all the corn, and then they'd sit in the middle of what they knocked down and eat. So they had everybody's freezers full.
and this was a cinnamon bear, which
And it's unusual.
it's very
Yeah,
unusual.
brown.
Yes.
So
So,
the same year, some guy in Woolwich got one.
yes, and there was one killed in Center County. I guess they're naming it in Alaska.
Yeah.
They said that it might have been an albino bear. I don't know. But I was blown away when I knew Nevin and John Springer were involved in that.
Well, I think your grandfather was quite a survivor on venison and whatever.
But he was the stickler. He rarely broke the law. It was great uncle Roy
Okay.
that
Well,
was the hunter and did that. In fact, the game warden arrested him one time, and my dad, my grandmother called my dad and said, "Will you go down and bail him out?" And my uncle Roy was so pissed that he went down and got him out of jail because he was having a good time talking to everybody.
He was telling stories, and Daddy said they had guys all around sitting listening to him.
Well, I can remember, they had a sawmill up at the top of the hill, right close to the cemetery,
Yeah.
right across and they had a pile of sawdust there from the sawmill. And the story was that they buried their deer hides in the sawdust pile. And they had so many deer hides, they run out of sawdust to bury. So your grandparents lived on, Roy.
Oh, no,
He-
they
When you
reaped the
needed
benefits.
meat, you went out and got it.
They
Yeah.
reaped the benefits, but we knew never, you weren't allowed to talk about it. But they'd say, when you go to school, do not tell anybody this happened. You know, we all, wasn't it you, Bill, that
Yeah.
said, filled the beans? No, we knew, we were.
Yeah,
warned.
you learned,
Yes.
you kept quiet.
I would love to have a big pot of venison stew right now. It would
No,
be so
we're not
good.
going out outlaw.
She's trying to bring a history back.
It's in your
It's been a
blood.
long
It's in
time
your
since
blood.
we outlawed it.
You talk about the outlaw, and I can remember sitting there with my grandfather and grandmother in the old kitchen that they had in the back with the cook stove. Now, coffee then, you put the big old iron coffee pot on the cook stove. You never took the grounds out. You added and added water to it. So by the end of the week, you oozed it into the coffee cup. But anyways, I'll never forget the game warden showing up and sitting there talking to my grandfather, and he said, "Charlie, how you doing?" He said, "Could you use a deer?" And he says, "No, I have all the venison I need. There's one hanging in the barn right now." And I'm sitting there and I'm looking, and he looked at my grandfather and said, "Oh, Charlie, quit BSing me." And he left. He wasn't lying. There was one hanging in the barn.
There's Earl.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, come on.
Girl, so glad to meet you. With the chair up.
There's a chair up there for you.
You want to come up here and tell your stories, Earl? Yeah, you're right. They never wasted it either. They used it, they canned it, and it never went to waste.
This means we have to stop talking about Earl now, right?
We'll give it all to Earl now.
Pick him on the
You
bell.
leave it?
Look, and my son.
Oh, you got your.
Stay right there.
You smell my dog.
There you are, Earl.
Get my dog. Yeah. Wow. Do I have to promise not to tell any lies?
No, we want nothing but the truth.
Yeah. It's all your turn, Earl.
Well, who wants to know what?
What's the old schoolhouse that's over Camp Joe? What schoolhouse was that?
Well, now, I'm an input. I haven't went to none of these old schoolhouses out here.
He knows as much
Well,
as I do.
I knew Uncle Jim knew, but I thought maybe you might know too.
I'm sorry, I
We
can't help.
don't know the name, but it was ever since I can remember, it's the
Thank you.
Camp Joe.
But yeah, I'll have to, the histories, I'll have to get it for you. I can't remember maybe it was Maurer's School, I'm not sure.
I can tell you a little story about Warren and his mother when I first met him. My wife's uncle, Dean Probst, he had the farm next to your old farm, right?
Yep.
Well, you and your mother walked up to catch a school bus one day. Where did you catch a school bus at? Right at the store?
Talk at the store there.
Yeah. Well, you got on the school bus and your mother and I had a long chat. So that's when I first met your mother. And then Uncle Dean got a divorce from Aunt Millie. So he ended up having a farm to himself. She got a place in Arizona.
Yeah.
Yeah. So where does that let us? Well, anyways, we used to keep the horses out there
Yep.
at, we called them Uncle Dean's place. And this one night, we come out and the horses were sweat wet, and I thought, what's going on here? On the far side of the barn, the window was broke out. And a mess of scratches on the side of the barn. What we could estimate was the darn bear come in, decided to get something to eat, didn't get in, but there was a screen light over the window. And that's what kept him out of the barn. And then we raised some pigs while we were out there.
I don't remember the pigs.
And down in remember the pig pen down over the hill?
Yeah.
Well, it had a concrete floor in it. And the only way we was going to get the pigs into town was load them in the horse trailer. Did you ever try and put a rope on a pig and lead it around? Oh boy, it didn't work out too good. But we finally got them on the horse trailer. After my brother, he had a hold of the rope. He got up in the horse trailer. I said, now you pull and I'll give him a smack. When he gets up in there, you tie him tight so he can't back off, then we'll throw the tailgate up. Well, he got up in there, got everything lined up, I gave him a smack, but the darn thing went the wrong direction. He went back down to the pin, and there went my brother like a log. He held on. But there's a concrete floor in that. Did you ever know that down there?
Yeah.
And it's above the ground level a little bit. Well, I'll bet you his rope left him about a foot from going into the pen with he would have been done up pretty good if he'd hit that concrete floor on the way in, you know. But we got the right idea. We was going to lasso a deer. So down at the lower end, you know, where they come over from your farm, is that the gas line that goes across there? They followed the gas line. Well, me and my buddy, I can remember his name. I don't remember too many names, but his name was Jerry Berry. We got the right idea. There's a tree down there with a limb going straight out across where the gas line went. We were going to get up on there and we were going to get a rope and drop it over the deer's neck. Well, we missed the first couple. But he said, there's more back there, they're coming. So where we made the mistake was, we tied the rope to the limb we were sitting on. So that come through. He was running the rope, Jerry. He dropped the rope down right over the neck, just right. Boom, out the end of the rope. You know where we ended up at? That deer pulled that limb, snapped it, and we was down with the deer before we knew what happened. But it broke the deer's neck. Oh, poor thing, its tongue hung out that far, you know. But it didn't feel nothing. It went just like that. So there Jerry and I said, now we have a deer to take care of. So what are we going to do? Well, we don't have nothing out here to take care of it. We have to take it in home. Well, we decided to throw a couple bales of hay on and put the deer in the bottom. So we got the deer in and got it butchered pretty good. But I never forgot sitting on, and I don't know whether that tree's still down there. It's a big tree, but it had a limb going straight out across. It yanked us right out of there. And that's not a lie. Now, Jerry, he couldn't come with me today to back me up. He died several years ago. So I can tell all kinds of stories about me and Jerry, and I don't have to worry about getting caught in the lie. Do you have any more good stories, Jerry?
You know,
I can remember your mother walked you up one day. That's where I first met her. She walked you up the lane to catch a school bus up at the store.
Yeah. Well, we didn't have a school bus.
Well, I did.
We rode with the teacher.
I see. I didn't know that.
Yeah. I mean, he picked us up. He picked me up there, but that was our mode of transportation.
I see.
And I remember in the early 50s, I don't know whether you remember the gas well being drilled out here.
Oh, do you remember? Okay, yes, I do, and that remind me of a story. They didn't have a gas well on the right of way going down there, but they had a blow-off valve down there.
They used to pump fuel oil through the pipeline.
I see.
And then it converted it to gas And when they drilled the well here, they ran a line. There was a well drilled right here, right at the edge of the edge of the straightaway here. There was a gas well drilled there and one out in Springer's Field. And the one that was drilled here, they ran a line from down there on which was Weiser's property at the time, or Probst's. They run a gas line over to feed the engine.
I see.
To drill the well here. And that's after they drilled the well, they capped the tap off, but there was a piece of pipe sticking up about this far. And I don't know who was mowing the grass. Who was it, you?
No, a boy by the name of Jerry Berry.
Okay.
He's not alive, so I can
He was mowing grass.
Yeah.
In the field, he was mowing hay. And he hit that pipe and knocked it off.
It sounded like a jet line.
We live a half mile away from that, and it sounded like a jet engine was in my front yard.
Oh, it was shrill.
It blew him off the tractor, and he didn't get hurt.
And it stalled the tractor.
The tractor stalled, so it didn't catch fire, but the crankcase and everything on the tractor was just frosted white. It was froze up solid.
Oh my God.
And
Actually, it had a big chunk of ice on it.
Yeah.
It froze that hard.
It took them about 6 or 8 hours, or maybe a day, to get the gas shut down.
Boy, it screamed like a jet, didn't it?
Yep.
It had a lot of pressure on it.
Damn noise I ever heard.
Our dad worked on that well.
Yeah, your dad was one of the riggers.
No, I ain't telling the story.
Oh, go ahead, no.
And I'm not lying, but I'm sitting here starting to sweat.
Earl, you live out near the Mohawk. Do you have any Mohawk stories to share?
I never lived at the Mohawk. They were just friends of my wife.
Yeah, they're neighbors. They're in the neighborhood. Do you have any stories about them?
I do not, no.
Oh, rats. Thanks.
But I got some things I can tell you about the Mohawk.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I've got some stories about the Mohawk, but I'm not gonna say them.
Well, my wife was friends of people that had the Mohawk. And they used to have a buggy. I forget what type of car it was. It had the top cut off of it. Do you remember that buggy they used to run around in?
No, I don't.
Well, anyways, we call it the Ridge Road. Used to come the whole way over. And they stopped, they picked me up in the buggy and we were going to come over to the store. We got out about halfway and the darn thing started to, here, they didn't put no gas in it. So we ran out of, and it sat there on the road for, a week or so or longer till they decided to carry some gas over and gas it back up and take it back to the Mohawk. And I was trying to think who all was in on that. How did Doc Thomas's son get involved out here?
Can't answer that.
That I don't know either. I know Thomas has got involved.
Louis was
Louis Winter.
he was one of the top ones, right?
Yes, yeah. I'm having a senior moment. Who was the top dog at the Winters?
I thought Louis was. And then his son was about about probably 4 or 5 years older.
Older, yeah.
They owned the Winter's packing plant, right? They owned the Winter's packing plant in Lock Haven?
Yes.
They did, yes.
Yes.
My grandfather got killed there.
Oh, really? Oh,
The boiler blew up and he got killed there
ouch.
in the 50s.
That vehicle they had, that was an old Model 8, was it? With the top cut off? Because I can remember my grandparents had one that they made into a buzzsaw to cut wood.
They had on the back axle,
Well, they had the whole frame and everything there with the motor and the transmission. And then on the back, they had made the long board that you could push
Across it, yes.
Yeah, push across with
I
the
remember
big,
that.
with the big 40-inch or whatever, 50-inch. I have the saw blades yet that run off the
It had
transmission.
it had a big flat belt.
Yeah.
You used to be able to hook onto a tractor.
Yep, you could do that, but they
And
had,
why did we have to cross the belt for some reason?
they
Depending
had
which way you wanted to run the blade.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
what it was, to make the blade run the right way. Yeah, we had to put a cross on the belt to make
Yeah.
it run the right direction. Oh, hey Warren, don't get old, it's not fun.
Well, I take it you've been in the Mohawk. Have you ever seen the huge map that they have that covers almost the whole wall? And I understand it's still there, it's been several years since I saw it. But it was dated from like the old Myers farm before the Kaylers cut it all up, and it had all the old farms in the area that I thought was so interesting.
I never saw it. In fact, I've never been in the Mohawk.
That was the only time I was ever in it. But I thought that was very interesting.
Well, I'm having a senior moment here, but right straight across from where our property line stops, you can go back in, there's a road. And there's a Y in it, you go back and you hook a left. And there's a big stone monument back in there. Did you ever see that?
Yeah.
Where we're at now?
Almost straight across the end of my property, over on the Mohawk side, there's a road that goes back in. And it has a Y. The one, if you take it to the right, it goes back down in and out to the Mohawk. But to the left, there's a big stone monument out there. I forget.
Did Jim Copenhaver have you back there? That's our uncle.
No.
No? Okay. Because I remember he had us back there. And I saw
My wife had me back in there when she was alive.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know what it
But there's
signifies, but yeah.
Well, there is a plate there that, and I having a senior moment, I can't remember what it said. But it's big. Somebody put a lot of work into it.
Yeah, somebody did.
Yeah.
Like a monument, it's a concrete monument.
Yes. Yeah. Can't miss it. You go back there.
How far from the gate, where the gate was? $50 yards? 100 yards?
From here over to the containers,
100 yards.
about that. Not straight, but it's about that, yeah.
So off to the left or right, or?
The monument, you go to the left. If you go to the right, you go back on down and follow the trail that takes you right back to the Mohawk. Never heard of it?
No, I don't recall it, no. No.
Well, it's permanent and it's been there for a while.
So Earl, you said your wife was from out here. What was her maiden name?
Weber,
Oh, okay.
yeah. And they
Jake
were,
Weber's? Any relation to Jake Weber, or?
I don't think so.
No, it wasn't Jay.
No. No. They were in on what they call the, what was that farm right at the top of the Switchdale Hill? You turn left and go back down in a row of pine trees on both sides. Oh. Winters owned it, but they lived on it. That's where she used to get on the school bus, right at the top of the hill.
Can't remember.
Our school buses always went to Woolwich and then up that way, so we didn't know any kids unless we went to school with them there.
Well, they had an old station wagon with seats on the side of it. They used to use that for the school bus. That's what she used to catch. Because she told me about it several times. Never seen a picture of it or anything. Boy, you're sitting there awful quiet.
I'm letting you talk.
I know.
You're going back a little before my memory.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. And my dog's name's Cookie.
And she's my buddy too.
Yeah. The SPCA brought her out to me. She says, Earl, we know your first buddy is buried in your yard. This one here is just as good. They found her on the dike with stab wounds.
Don't you feed that dog? Don't
Pardon?
you feed that poor dog?
No, she's sort of withering away, isn't she? Yeah.
Well, what happened to you? Oh, you ended up in the hospital.
Which time?
This last time.
Well, the last time they picked me up out here at the field, remember?
No.
Up there on top of the hill, they have a place squared off and it's snowed. It's designated a landing area, I guess. Well, that's where they picked me up at.
What happened?
I don't know. I wasn't conscious at the time. I can't tell you whether I had a good ride or not, you know.
Well, did they tell you what happened? Your heart quit.
More or less. Make a long story short, I had some heart problems, you know. Yeah. But everything's all right now.
Well, that's the main thing.
Yes, yeah.
Go ahead, Cookie.
Well, all you good people didn't sit here just to hear me come up here.
Everybody else.
We waited on you.
Everybody's been hanging around just to hear all that.
Well, I'm sorry I'm late. You know, you'll never guess what happened. Yes, you will guess what happened. I fell asleep. I thought, boy, I better get out to the schoolhouse. They'll disown me.
Well, Cookie disowned you now.
Yeah, I know.
Carl, how long have you lived here?
Here, Cookie. Cookie.
Huh. Well, we lost our house in the 72 flood. And I asked the wife, I said, well, where do you want to go to live? She said, I don't know about you, but I'm going out to camp. So I would say in that neighborhood of 72 to 75.
Okay.
Yeah. But we lived down along the river prior to that. We had 10 acres down there. Had a good time down there. Had boats.
72 would be 53 years. 53 years. If you came out here in 72. You came out at a good time. You got away from the flood.
Well, not exactly. Our house was down there. And boy, our living room or our kitchen table went up against the chandelier, smashed it. The flood got that high. There wasn't much left, so I didn't have much of a choice. I asked the wife, I said, where do you want to go? She said, I'm going to camp. So out we came. And luckily we did have camp, you know. Yeah. Well, at the time, we just had the foundation in. The top wasn't built. So I said, I guess we're going to have to build the top. She said, well, if we're going to live here, we're going to have to do something. So that's when we put the top part on then. You can't remember any of that.
I remember you moving out, I don't know when. The thing I remember is when you had your horses there at Dean's.
Yes.
Because I would go up and feed them for them during the week.
Yes, you did. Yeah. Yeah. I can remember one time your mother walked you up to the bus.
Yeah.
And we were dumb enough to get a calf out of it. Remember how we used to had that little milk container about that high? We got skim milk at Johnson Balls and brought it out to keep the calf going.
I don't remember that.
Dumbest thing we ever done. Boy, I'll tell you. And then it got the skidders. And boy, oh boy, what a mess. And I know that I can't remember what we ever done with it, whether we sold it or what.
I don't remember.
I
I remember the horses there.
Yeah.
And of course, there was where Springer School is, or Springer Store is. before that was Springer Store. That used to be, my uncle ran in the 30s, Uncle Russell. And he had the store there, and then there was a post office. We used to have a post office there. It was where the oil shed was at the end there. That was a place where it was the U.S. Post Office.
Oh, is that where the first post office was?
Yeah.
Okay, that was
in
before 1900.
Yeah. That was in the 30s.
Remember that old gas pump? They pump it and they had a big round glass at the top, and they'd fill it up, and then it'd go into the
Gravity feed
into the vehicles.
Yeah.
Oh, so there were two post office locations in Caldwell.
No, that was the only one that I know of.
Well, there was, I thought there was one down by the Caldwell Dam.
No.
I found the documentation that it was before 1900 that Caldwell finally had their first, I think it was.
It may have been, and it may have moved up there, but it was up at where it's.
Yeah, because I thought I heard stories where it was down by the dam. Who originally owned that house down there? Wasn't it one of your relatives?
Well, Evers lived there, and I don't know.
Long before the Evers.
There was 3 or 4 other people.
Wasn't there a Swartz that lived there?
Yeah,
Yeah.
probably there.
Because he was the postmaster.
Okay, that would have been in the 20s.
All right.
In the 20s.
Does she have her leash on her yet?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, she's got it.
We got it.
You talking about the Evers reminds me of when I was in grade school, my Uncle Joe Allen and Fred Evers used to ride motorcycles together. And they stopped here one day, and Fred Evers picked me up and set me on his motorcycle and said, "When you grow up, I'm going to marry you." And if you knew Fred Evers, that was no compliment. But, but his brother Dave was still in school, and he looked at me and he said, "He's not going to marry you. He's got a girlfriend already."
Dave was good looking.
Yeah, he wasn't bad looking.
I got one story to tell about Evers.
Okay.
Gerald, there was Gerald and Fred and Dave Evers. And Dave and I grew up together. He was the youngest, Fred was the older.
Yeah.
Fred
Fred was Alan's age, yeah.
Gerald was the oldest son.
Daddy wants you to stay here.
He was in the Korean War. And he come back from the war, and of course, I was just a kid. We were kids, probably about 14 years old. And they used to fish in the dam. So one time they decided they were going to really fish. So he got the core out of a starter, and they put 3 sticks of dynamite on it and wrapped it up, and they took it out and threw it in the pond and in the dam. And when that went off, I mean, kaboom, you know, a big splash of water. And we thought we were going to have a lot of fish. With no fish, the only thing we saw was a bunch of little fish. But old man Evers, he come out running out. He was crippled, and he come running out. "What the hell are you boys doing?" he says, when that dynamite went off. But that was an experience and a half.
Every time I see a plumber commercial with the pant line, I think of Ralph Evers. Sparky Evers, yeah.
You know, I was surprised when I found out that the water from Queens Run didn't go to Lock Haven. It went to Mill Hall. Did you ever know that?
Yeah.
Yeah. what's it called, Suburban Water
Suburban.
Company? Yeah, Suburban Water Company. Now, isn't that something? Come clear down over here to Queens Run to get water from Mill Hall. Yeah. You'd have thought it would have went to Lock Haven.
Yeah.
That's why you Mill Hall boys were so smart. I was married to one, so I can say that.
I'm not gonna make a comment on that. Did I miss any good story by not getting here on time?
No, Bill told some stories here. Do you know any stories about moonshining and distills?
Me?
Yeah.
No,
No?
no.
I told two of them, so I know where there was two places where Prince Farrington had.
Out here?
Was Prince his given name, or was that just something people call him?
Huh?
Was Prince his given name?
I think, yeah.
Yeah, title Prince Farrington.
No, that's actually his first name.
I believe he was named after the doctor who delivered him, and his name was Dr. Prince.
Oh, that's correct.
He died alone and poor. His wife left him, divorced him,
Gave all his money away.
Well, it made a little bit about selling moonshine, I guess.
What was that farm he had over the top of Logan Hill?
Huh?
What was the name of that farm he had over the top of Logan Hill?
Florida Fruit Farm.
That's it, Florida Fruit Farm. Yeah.
Well, my great uncle Roy used to have a still that he made his own stuff to drink over to farm.
Yeah.
I never saw it, but my relatives talked about it.
Is that fruit farm between Logan and Livonia?
Yeah,
Okay.
yep. It's up on top of the hill.
Yeah. See, that's getting into my territory. I'm from Center County.
I see. Well, Cookie, we're doing pretty good. I didn't tell no lies here yet today.
All right, well, you guys ready to wrap it up then?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.